Good morning on this Sunday, February 9th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Hundreds of people protesting President Trump's policies gather across Georgia. Also, Georgia's House Speaker unveils details on his school safety reform plan after the Appalachia High School shooting. And Fulton DA Fonnie Willis's request for more funding for her office denied by the Board of Commissioners. Melita, Phil, Martha, and Theron are all here. The debate and discussion begins right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Those protesting President Trump's policies, including mass deportations, took to the streets this week all over Metro Atlanta. Hundreds gathered along Buford Highway in Chamblee to speak out against the recent wave of ICE deportations happening all across the country.
We are basically being hunted down by ICE, and it's just, we live in fear, and we are here because we don't want everyone to live in fear, so we're going to speak out.
Joseph Pastor is one of the organizers of the event. He says many in attendance were young people speaking out for their families. Also this week, protesters gathered at Georgia's Capitol and Centennial Olympic Park. They say they are fighting for their vision of America. This protest, part of a coordinated effort across all 50 states under the hashtag Build the Resistance.
I'm just blessed that enough people are not scared to come out today.
Well, some of the protesters did express disappointment that the crowds were not as big as compared to the beginning of President Trump's first term. They say that's because people are scared to speak out. Theron, to you first this week. Supporters of the president say he's accomplishing so much so soon because these are the issues that he campaigned on, and he's just fulfilling his promises.
Yes, and what I shared with you all when we started the show off this morning is that I had to really remind myself this morning in the shower is that we haven't even seen 30 days go by yet. I mean, but this president is doing what he told his supporters and the people he voted for, that he's doing exactly what he told them he was going to do. Now, that does not make it right. I think we will all agree that there's definitely a need for more strategic communication. I think the press has a role to do with that, but also a lot of what we're hearing come out of Washington, quite frankly, Lori, is just really confusing a lot of folks. The other thing that I was very proud to see in your package, and that's a good package, thank you again, is that while peaceful protest is always necessary, but you saw a lot of documented and undocumented and illegal immigrants at this rally. Whether the crowd size is there, yeah, we can get into a debate that maybe people right now are a little bit fatigued, but I was very happy that the mayor of Brookhaven, John Park, stepped up and said, hey, look, we have a lot of people who live in the Brookhaven community. We want them to feel welcome and heard. But yes, you do have people afraid to go to the grocery store. You have people afraid to send their kids to school, scared to go to church. And so there is this sort of air of uncertainty and fear right now. But ultimately, I do want to commend the peaceful protesters for doing it peacefully. And I think you'll see more protests to come.
Martha?
Well, there's no way to know really if they're documented, undocumented, or whatever, because they weren't asking people or taking documents on the people. But I do think that there's two things that have to happen here. The messaging on the Trump side needs to be better, although if you listen to what is actually said, it is, people that already have deportation orders, violent criminals, and they've already found about 30,000 of the 300,000 children that have been missing that they had lost track of, and they've reunited some of them with their actual families, and I think that's a positive thing, and they're missing that messaging. And then on the other side, what the media needs to do is they need to stop inciting this concern, because we've had it in Gainesville too. We've had the protest there too. I would say to the protesters, you need one message. I mean, you drive across, you really don't know what they're against. They're against everything. And I also would say that if you're 50-1 Mexican flags to American flags, you're not going to win too many people over on that. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done on all of this, but I think the messaging could be better on the administration side.
All right, representatives from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, reportedly visited the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, right here in Atlanta. Melita, according to the Washington Post, managers at the CDC were told to rank their employees in terms of mission critical and not mission critical.
Well, there's a lot of fear in the halls of the CDC, and we have to remember that the CDC is an $11.6 billion agency with about 15,000 personnel. It's headquartered here in Atlanta. Emory has something like $300 million worth of contracts with the National Institute of Health. And UGA and the Medical College of Georgia and Georgia Tech have been increasingly working in this health field of research. So whatever happens with the CDC will have a dramatic impact in Georgia. The other dramatic impact, going back to what we were just talking about, is the fact that 60% of the workforce for Georgia agriculture is through those H-2A visas. So what are we going to do if those people are too afraid to come to Georgia and harvest the Vidalia onions beginning in April? There are some dire consequences that we could possibly see based on the fear that the Trump administration has so successfully stirred up.
Phil.
Let me respond to that. I just interviewed our Agriculture Commissioner, Tyler Harper, on Thursday, and I asked about the H-2A. These are guest workers that come in seasonally. They are given the prevailing wage. They have housing given to them. There is no problem here. You're stoking fear, in my opinion. I think that's a great program. Trump and everybody should be in favor of our guest worker programs. We're going to be fine with our crops. But the overall thing with the Centers for Disease Control is very simple. We're trying to cut the bureaucracy, and that's what Trump has told everybody. And I thought a lot of Democrats were for lowering the deficit. The last CDC director, as you remember, was fired for incompetence. These are recommendations on how to trim things, and I think every panelist on this show during the latter COVID years said they were doing conflicting things. They were also funding gun control studies. That's not the mission of the Centers for Disease Control.
But the CDC has been ordered to shut down communications, and yet we have this avian flu that is dramatically affecting Georgia poultry operations and nationwide. So some of the core mission of the CDC is being gutted by these Trump initiatives.
I believe they're trying to do the core mission and get rid of the side missions.
But this is a transition time that we're seeing much more openly than we've seen it in other administrations. This is not unlike what other administrations have done when they've taken over.
Phil, I want to go back to you because the AJC reports that $1 billion of investment by the federal government to modernize Georgia's power grid is also in limbo. And to Martha's point, what she said earlier, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty out there. Maybe the messaging could be better.
I don't disagree with that. I do fault the media for not getting the message out from some of the Republican congressmen that I've talked to on the record over the last 24 hours. What's happened is that the Biden administration rushed through at the last minute all of these grants, and every administration, bipartisan, they stop and pause when there's a new administration. It's an audit to see what's in this $1 billion, and a lot of this is what Georgia needs. It's for grid improvement, et cetera, et cetera. There are embedded in this some sweetheart projects that are green energy that Biden wanted to get. They're being cut out, for lack of a better word. But this is just a pause. It'll come back in a few days.
Well, what the president has done is that he has overstepped his powers, and what he's done is that he's also created a constitutional crisis. And this is funding that has been approved by Congress. And the last time I checked, Phil, and I think you agree with this, Congress controls the purse. And so at the end of the day, there is a congressional oversight put in place in this constitution of this country to make sure that things that are mandated, like funding for our grid, it's got to go through. And so there are people that also tell me, oh, you know what, don't worry about it, it's not going to happen. You know, I have Republicans tell me, oh, it's just Trump being Trump. This is a process, it's fluid. Well, no, when you start playing with our grid in Georgia, making sure that we have reliable, safe, affordable energy, I'm concerned. I think all Georgians are going to be concerned about that. So that is one, Lori, I'm glad you brought up, because as Georgia Power continues to invest all this money, and we need the grid, they just this week talked about how they need more money, more funding to basically be able to deal with the demand, more affordability. I think that this is something that we should all be concerned about.
Trump's not opposed to lessening the grid. He's for strengthening the grid.
Yeah, but when he does this constitutional crisis mode, allowing people to come in and confuse folks, then I think it's reported that $1 billion is in limbo now.
He's trying to cut waste.
Well,
not wasteful.
Theron is hitting on an important point. The constitutional crisis caused by a president who ignores the Constitution, who ignores the law, and who forces lawsuits up and down all over the country to challenge his ignoring the power structure and the way the structure is supposed to work.
Wrap it up, Martha, for us.
I just think using the term constitutional crisis is a little bit too far. And I think that what they're looking at is what is the role of the executive and what is the role of the Congress. The Congress, yes, appropriates the money, but the executive ultimately spends it.
All right, we'll leave it there, folks. Up next, Georgia's House Speaker announces school safety reforms after the shooting at Appalachian High School. We'll discuss after the break.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Georgia House Speaker John Burns unveils a comprehensive school safety plan following the Appalachia High School mass shooting that left 4 dead and several injured. Now, key measures include a statewide student information sharing database, anonymous threat reporting systems, and $50 million in funding for school safety upgrades. The proposal also introduces mandatory penalties for students making terroristic threats. Phil, we were waiting to find out really the details of this plan, and now we know more.
Well, that's right, and I'm glad you gave those 4 important points, and I think a lot of us on the panel have agreed that mental health is certainly a top priority, and I think that there's a bipartisan approach here that we can all agree on. I think, and we've talked about this on the show, I think that these school districts need to be better coordinating when it comes to these threats, and so I'm glad to see it's finally being addressed.
Theron?
Well, we also, and look, thank you, Speaker Burns, for doing exactly what he said he was going to do. I've complimented him on this show. I think other Republicans and Democrats need to join him in this effort. But while the Speaker did exactly what he was supposed to do and what he said he was going to do, there's still a couple more things I think we can do. Number one, we didn't hear a lot about safe gun storage. That's a part of the root problem, right? If you're going to have a gun, have responsible gun ownership, make sure you store the gun safely. Also, I think we can hear more about mental health, but also background checks. I think that we got to get to a point where we got to have universal background checks in this state to make sure that when a child goes from a school to a new school, that those counselors are talking and say, hey, this individual was a little trouble when he's at our school, he or she, now they're coming to your school, you may want to watch this. The last thing I think that also needs to happen is that we need a trained, armed resource security officer in every single school in Georgia. And I know the governor has taken some steps as far as funding. I think we can do more. But ultimately, I think this is a good first step, and many people in a bipartisan way join the Speaker.
Martha?
Yeah, I think overall it's a good plan. I agree with Theron that the safe gun storage bill is one to look at. I interviewed at length Senator Michelle Au, who is reintroducing that this time, and I think there's some work that needs to be done to that bill, but I think that it is a good start in that direction too, and it could be something that might be a good compromise between Democrats and Republicans and might be able to be a part of that. But all in all, you know, I think it's good, and the school resource officer is so important to be able to have that in every single school.
It's nice to hear bipartisan support. The trial of the former prosecutor in the Ahmaud Arbery case is over. A felony indictment charging Jackie Johnson with violating her oath of office was dismissed due to technical errors in its wording. Johnson was also acquitted of a misdemeanor charge of obstructing police earlier in the week. Melita, were you surprised by these results?
I think everybody was surprised that this happened. Even the judge expressed regret at having to dismiss the case. But frankly, the Attorney General's team did a poor job of prosecuting. They drew up the indictment with bad language. And I was interested to learn that it was something that was not in news reports. Former DeKalb District Attorney J. Tom Morgan was to have been the next witness for the defense just before the judge threw out the case. He was planning to testify as a pro bono witness on behalf of the former district attorney, saying that she had not violated the law. So that was interesting. It didn't make any of the news reports. But I think we have to focus on the fact that the 3 men who caused the death of Ahmaud Arbery are in jail, are serving terms, were found guilty. Now, aspects of this case will proceed as civil lawsuits against the county and against some of the other individuals. But this county really needs to heal, and the systemic racism of that area needs to be healed as well.
Phil?
Well, I don't know about systemic racism of the area. I think that's a broad brush to paint, but I do think it was a surprise. I do agree that, yeah, we can't lose sight of the fact that, you know, the people that committed the crimes are still in jail. I think, and I talked to Attorney General Chris Carr, he stands totally by what his prosecutors have done. I'm still a little confused about how you could get the oath of office wrong. I don't get that part.
Theron?
You know, the thing about it is that, well, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. We wanted Jackie Johnson to have a fair case, right? To have a fair trial. We all know the horrific scenes, and I agree with Melita. These terrible individuals need to be behind jail because that was a horrific attack on a black man who was innocently jogging and running down the street and was murdered. I want to commend the family. I was going to save it to winners, but the family of Ahmaud Arbery came out while they were disappointed with the ruling. It wasn't chaotic. They weren't combative. They definitely said that they felt that it could have been a better case presented. And so we got to move on and heal in that county. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, this was an abrupt ending to a case that we probably thought was going to go a little longer.
You know, I think that Brunswick has the ability to heal, and I think they've shown that by the way they've handled this. But I would say that Ben Crump released a statement, the attorney for the family, where he applauded the work that the Attorney General's office did and how they pursued it and how they, you know, they didn't give up. They were diligent throughout all of that. So I think, while I was really disappointed, as you might have guessed, with how it ended up, I think that she got her day in court, and we can't lose sight of the fact is the people that killed Ahmaud Arbery are behind bars.
We'll leave it there. Coming up, Fulton County's Board of Commissioners denied Fani Willis's request for more money to fund her department.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The AJC reports DA Fani Willis's request for more funding for her department denied by the Fulton County Board of Commissioners by a 5-2 vote. Willis said she needs more funding to adequately deal with the number and the nature of the cases her office handles. Phil?
Well, I have to commend the bipartisan majority of the Fulton County Commission that said no mas, no more. I'm being bilingual here. What's happened is that she has wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money on this witch hunt against President Trump, sending her ADAs all over the country. She has only herself to blame for the waste of money, and I'm glad they put a halt to it.
Theron.
You know, the last thing we want to see happen in Fulton County is another consent decree, right? I mean, we know that the district attorney's office is stretched thin. She has got a lot of demand on existing cases and new cases. However, as Phil just reminded me as we came into this segment, you got to work your politics with the commission. And I think Martha said it best too, not taking words out of your mouth, I'll give you credit for it, but I think the commission also heard from some folks in Fulton County about wanting more transparency and what's going to be happening with the funding. I do believe, though, that the district attorney did a good job of alerting us, like, hey, I am stretched thin. We need more resources because we want people to have their fair day in court. But ultimately, there's just a little bit of a tension there between the commission and the district attorney, how she's going about asking for the funding. So what you'll probably see next is that when we start talking about how people are not being prosecuted, people are awaiting trial, they're sitting in jail, that's unfair to the sheriff, then you'll probably hear her go to say, hey, had I had more funding, I could get this done faster.
Yeah, it's not the last we've heard.
Yeah.
Another interesting story out of the AJC, the state of Georgia has apparently made an offer to the city of Atlanta for 2 tracts of land, 10,000 acres each. City officials are deciding what to do as this brings up the age-old debate of whether Atlanta needs another commercial airport or should the state lock them into permanent conservation. Now, the tracts of land are located in Paulding and Dawson counties. Melita.
Well, this gives the city of Atlanta a very interesting dilemma because in 1970, when this land was purchased, the Atlanta metro area was about 2.2 million people, and now we are 6.3 million. And we are one of the few largest cities in the nation that's not bound by a body of water in some fashion. So where are we growing, and will we ever need that second airport? And the earlier government in 1970 was very forward thinking by setting the land aside. But I certainly hope that if it is not used for an airport, it absolutely will be preserved, because we need the balance of conserved natural land for all the development that we're doing statewide.
Martha, what do they do? Does the city hold on to one track and maybe sell the other?
And as I understand, the state's been sort of managing it, right? Is
Yes.
how that works. Look, I may have a little different view on this. I don't think that the city of Atlanta is ever going to build a second airport. I think they love the idea of, and maybe it'll change 30 years from now when I'm in the dirt, okay? But I think they love the idea of being the biggest airport in the world, and they want to continue to figure out a way to make that happen in the location that they're in. I think they've shown that over the last 50 years that that's what they want. So I think the best solution is to protect this land and just move on from the idea of a second airport, and let's start getting people to go to Chattanooga or Greenville.
The world's largest and most efficient airport.
I
You're
love
right,
the
Martha.
Atlanta
I agree with
airport.
that.
Everywhere I travel, the Atlanta airport
They do a good job.
is the best airport I go through, so I love it.
And the Atlanta airport is on 4,700 acres as compared to 10,000, these tracts of land.
needs 10,000.
And the terminal is 130 acres, which I found shocking when I looked it up.
Let's remember that, yes, our population is growing. Let's keep one tracked just in case. We're the only major airport in the country that doesn't have a second airport, and I think we're going to need one.
All right, Cobb County Commissioner Jerica Richardson is off the board after the State Court of Appeals declined to take up Richardson's case. This all stems over a redistricting fight between the state and county leaders. Theron.
You know, I know Commissioner Richardson very well. When Jerica came to the city of Atlanta, she was young, bright, ambitious, and really honestly, when talking to her, her heart and her mission has always been about serving people, and it's very unfortunate that she just got caught up in this political drama with this redistricting. It's unfortunate she's lost this case. Congratulations to her. She just gave birth to a new baby. But I think that she's a fighter, and this is not the last time we would hear her in a political space. But I do want to say that I think that we better pay very close attention to what's happening in Cobb. Every single commissioner, every single local official, what they're doing there and how they were able to maneuver it at the legislature is something that I think could be replicated in other counties.
Phil, this has really been a messy situation in Cobb County.
Yeah, let me give a little better perspective since my friend glossed,
I thought my
glossed
perspective
over
was good.
this.
Yeah.
The issue was home rule, and should the county do the redistricting, or can the state legislature trump that? And there are exceptions to home rule, and this was an exception. It did go to the courts properly. I know you're upset because the Republican map won, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, to use a cliche.
I'm not an angry black man, Phil. I'm not upset. It's okay.
Melita, weigh in on the cookie and how it crumbled.
Well, the thing about the cookie crumbling is that later on, as our demographics shift, some of the places where Republicans will later lose power, the Republicans might not like the way the cookie crumbles then.
You want to wrap up the cookie?
I just really need to calm Melita down a little bit. I think she's very angry today, so we'll have to see how that goes.
Not angry,
Just passionate. Yes. Okay, with a little white woman passion. It's okay. It's all right.
All right, we'll leave it there, folks. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, we're talking, so I don't know. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Back this week. All right, so my first winner is going to be my godmother, Vicki Johnson. Lori, her and her retiree women, they listen to the show, they watch the show every single Sunday. So happy birthday to Vicki Johnson.
Oh, happy birthday.
Also, happy Black History Month. And so I want to recognize a few folks. So the first one is Dorothy Lee Bolden, a Georgia native and founder of the National Domestic Workers Union of America, who worked to fight to end to promote women's rights and bring segregation to an end. And also I found this one, Lori, Steve Henson, a black inventor of ranch dressing and the founder of Hidden Valley Ranch. You didn't know that, did you?
Thank goodness for him.
That the ranch dressing is the #1 dressing that Americans and across the world use,
Yes.
but it was invented by a black man. So when you pour that ranch dressing from now on, Phil, just
We're
know
gonna
it
be
was
thinking
invented by a
about
black
that.
Good to
man.
know on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yes,
There you go.
absolutely, with our wings. All right.
So I want
Martha.
Alan Kinder, World War II vet, turned 100 last
Aw,
week.
happy birthday.
He was waiting to turn 100, and now he says he wants to make it to the Battle of the Bulge 80th anniversary. He lives independently. He's the most amazing guy. He's from Gainesville.
Great.
I love him. Sam Kuvian, the mayor of Gainesville, got into the race against Andrew Clyde, and I love contested primaries. People hate me for that, but I love that, so it should be fun. And Chris Carr introduced the Hold the Line initiative for transnational gangs. That's a big week. And then I want to remember Pastor Rod Huey again. We're going to be raising money for his daughter's college fund in the next week or so. So stay tuned to me to find out about that.
And tell us who he is again.
He was my co-host on the show. Yes,
Yeah,
Pastor Rod Huey.
Very close. All right. Melita.
Well, my winner is Senate Democratic Whip Kim Jackson, because she offered an amendment to the Senate's bill which would ban transgender girls in sports. Her amendment would have required schools to offer comparable funding, comparable access to facilities and equipment to girls' teams. Now that would be real equality in sports, and it would be a good thing for girls. Of course, it didn't pass in the Republican-controlled Senate. My loser is Attorney General Chris Carr, because he has failed to join the state attorney generals who are filing a lawsuit against Elon Musk to protect the sensitive personal information, financial things like Social Security numbers, that all of us face the fact that all of that has been compromised by Elon Musk and his merry band of whatever you want to call those young men.
She is feisty today. All right, Phil.
Well, since we're honoring Georgia winners for Black History Month, I know you'll join me in honoring Clarence Thomas, who was a constitutional conservative, our Supreme Court Justice. Tomorrow, February 10th, is when Braves report to spring training. That's a winner. And also my winner is Doug Collins, the former congressman. He just got confirmed in a bipartisan vote to be the head of the VA, and he's going to be helping our veterans. So I think that's great.
All right, we got 27 seconds, which never happens. So Super Bowl?
Yeah, I'm going for the Chiefs.
I'm going with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles.
Eagles, because there's more UGA,
More UGA
more players on
So
there.
my husband says.
I'm going with the Chiefs.
All right.
I love the way
One thing we can agree
those
on.
team members contribute back to their community and do charitable work.
We'll see who's winning and losing next week then. See y'all. Have